there are absolutely moments where, whether you call it imposter syndrome or whatever it is, that it's like, how did I get here? How did an English major from Indiana University get here? So sometimes I reflect on that just from my own personal, like, whoa, this isn't quite what I expected. And then, yeah, the burden, right, that you carry for people. One of my first jobs was packing press kits at Hallmark, right? Like we would pack a catalog and some samples and ship them out and make catalogs. I worked in collateral, so definitely have been around since the dawn of digital. I helped make one of their first websites. And I was lucky enough to get involved with a company called ExactTarget, which was a digital marketing platform, primarily email back in those days, all of that. That was later acquired by Salesforce and is now their marketing cloud product. Throughout that journey, I had the opportunity to have just about every function in the company. So I've sold it, I've serviced it, I've implemented it, I've done tier 1 support, I've done it all. And I think that that's really helped prepare me in ways that I didn't even imagine. I never set out to be a CEO. It was sort of just like accidental. So I'm still like, how did I get here? But all of those experiences cumulatively now in my function, I think I just have a lot of understanding and empathy for what's happening really throughout the organization. I know what it's like to take, calls during the day. I know what it's like to try to work with customers and strategy. I know what it's like to work with really big, global, complicated brands. And so I think that's been really good. In terms of kind of when I came on board, it was definitely post the acquisition had been decided. All of that
It had
really
not, or it had been.
right.
It
So
had
that was
been.
all basically decided before I came on board, and I came on board at SAP. That was where I was, recruited from into to work in general. I was told on all the marketing products and think about how to evolve them and take them to the next level as part of the overall CX portfolio. A few weeks after joining was when we announced the acquisition of Emarsys. So I think I joined the end of August and we announced that like the beginning of November. So it was during that time that I was asked to take a probably informal GM role, if you will, to help manage that post-merger process. Because it's hard. It's hard from a cultural level, first of all. A company like Emarsys, which is a much smaller scale, entering one of the largest software companies in the world, is daunting. And people don't know what to expect, what that changes. And so
And
being
it's
able
not a
to
given that that'll work. I mean, there's history there that
absolutely,
says it's tough.
absolutely, it's super hard. And then, like at Emarsys in particular, they had an incredible founding team and organization. Those people had never really left. And so the culture was really strong, and the real feeling of a startup, and is that going to change, and all of those sorts of things. They're all super fair questions, right? Because those do change over time. The
Yeah.
expectations of what your business needs to do, even from just like compliance type things, right, is very different when you're a part of a company like an SAP or another huge company, right, like that. So that was a part of it, was just helping lead the organization right through that transformation, if you
Can we
will.
can we talk a little bit about that? And we don't have to get too deep in the weeds about the messy stuff, but I think almost by definition, it's just as messy. I mean, you're trying to match something, apples to oranges often, and it's just really, really difficult. Or can you talk a little bit about some of the specific hurdles you encountered, and then
Yeah, let me think of some things that are kind of worthy of sharing. But I do think you're right, just in general. I've been at every stage, right? I was the first employee at a company. I've gone public, I've been acquired, I've done acquisitions. And, other than like really getting that seed round to get your idea off the ground, honest to God, I think the post acquisition is the hardest. And that's any company, anywhere I've ever been involved with. It's hard because primarily, like I said, the people coming first. And I think the biggest challenges weren't so much like systems integrations and those kinds of things, which really are ongoing.
Right.
There's that kind of things that are happening across the business, which really impact the employees, right, at ground level, if you will, and they're what they do in their own employee experience. So making sure we didn't lose the employee experience, right, was definitely, I wouldn't say like a challenge, but it was definitely front of mind, right, for me, of when we're in this, especially when we're in that first year post acquisition. Like, are you onboarding at Emarsys? Are you onboarding at SAP? How do we explain that relationship? We're like a
Mm-hmm.
company within a company. So all those kinds of questions that still to this day persist,
Really.
quite honestly, about like, what does this mean? This is an ERP company, all that. So that really is kind of that ongoing answering of that and helping employees and other team members, even around SAP, understand that is just that education at scale, right? We're talking about a massive scale. So,
I mean, I'm thinking about some of the other conversations I've had with people who have had to manage, just, engineer those kinds of transitions. And so much of it ends up being, as you said a minute ago, it's about the people. But it's also about their emotions. People become, especially for a company like Emarsys, I imagine,
mhm.
people were kind of proprietary about what they had been doing there. I mean, you get that wonderful sense of ownership, but also, that comes with a protective, as you made the
Right.
gesture,
I
it's a
did like
protective.
a little bit of the Heisman, we would say in the
Right.
US, right?
Yeah.
Of hold on, right? We've worked on this thing for 15 years and you just don't know. And then the operating, like you said, particularly with engineering, but even go to market teams, it's just different motions.
Right.
And so certainly I would say the cultural challenges were the hardest in a way with those product and engineering teams because of that. People love and own their products, right? And that's what we love about them. So sometimes getting them to, as we would say, like crack open the code and really let other people in is a tough trust thing, right? That takes time.
How did you do that? I mean, was that just a function of time, like it's gonna happen, so you might as well, or
Yes, yes. It's a combination of things, right? It does just take time, right? And for me, it's just like showing up, saying the same thing over and over, showing that actually things are a lot better. And that we can bring the best of both worlds together. And that's such a unique opportunity. And really getting people excited about what advantage this brings, right? I think that's the job you're asking earlier about being a CEO. And I think one of the jobs as part of it that I've learned is I need to bring the energy into the organization. And so I think a big part of it was just simply reminding people of what an advantage it is. If we were still a standalone Emarsys company competing in the most competitive, right, landscape in the world, especially during the macroeconomic conditions and the things that we're seeing from marketers right now and all of that, it'd be very hard for us to continue to grow and go up market, right, and make it to the next level. And so SAP provides a clear advantage. We're able to interact with customers that we've always really been able to support. Big brands, right? We've always had customers like Sheen and Reformation and Columbia and these brands. But now we're being exposed, right, to even more. And it just gives us so much opportunity. I think people get excited about it. Sometimes daunted for sure, but overall excited. With engineering, it was just a lot of show and tell. So one of the unique things I think about Emarsys that was like a mind shift change, and certainly an evolution to that feeling of proprietariness, excuse me, was that engineering had originally all happened in a single location. And so even just over the first, and we just did it gradually. There was even a lot of challenge about time zones and time zone management, right? Which is fair,
sure.
especially in very collaborative groups like that with user experience and the like. So little by little, right, helping them, Emarsys turn into a really at scale global enterprise company is a gradual but large transformation. And so introducing some new concepts, introducing them to teams in Waldorf, having them go back and forth, all those kinds of things, gradually mixing teams, if you will, those kinds of things. So A little more delicate, if you will, with the product and engineering organization.
You kind of have to be. Yeah. That
Yeah.
that almost goes without saying, but I'm glad you said it. Because
Yeah.
now it's out there and everybody has
I
to
hope I don't
acknowledge
get
it.
in trouble with
Right.
my teams, but it's all like the good things,
It
we
is a
just
good
wanted to
thing.
make sure we didn't break what was working, you know?
Right. Right. But you really did have to, in a sense, kind of pull it apart and replace all those pieces so they could interact with each other on a global scale. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
just the thought process, forget about implementing it and what that must have been like, but how are we going to globalize this thing that's been so local for so long?
Yeah. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, I would say, in my career. And of course, as they say, the most rewarding, but certainly the most challenging, because even if I didn't physically break it apart, right, we didn't try to do things quite in that way. Mentally, I had to, right, and we had to reconstruct it. And with the leadership team, we had to, get things through during the now, but definitely have that North Star vision of how we want to work together and what the operating model has to be, and how we advance even things like how we organize our customer success teams around all these different segments and types of customers, when we used to be focused primarily on retail and CP or anything just direct to consumer. And now we have all these different kinds of business models that we supported, but they weren't the majority.
I'm just curious. It's a little bit off center here, but now that you're part of a much bigger mothership, servicing all these different kinds of clients, is your customer support systems had to evolve, of course, but are you kind of just plugged into the larger SAP customer service, customer success systems, or does Emarsys still kind of operate on your own in terms of supporting your product or
Yeah,
products?
well, it's a little bit of both. So we definitely still maintain how we've always serviced our customers as a full SaaS model, and not doing a very different kind of work than what SAP is doing. We're not building robots on an assembly line, right? We're doing marketing. So the support models are just generally different. So how we do that, though, is with we basically take the lead. So if there's an SAP customer coming through that's a SAP wide, if you will, a larger part of the portfolio, it definitely starts with just general SAP support. And then we come in and add expertise. So we do get some advantages there from support, but it's yeah. So again, one of those advantages. We work very closely with all the services teams. We partner in every region with all like the regional presidents. Um, we work on the partner communities together. So there actually is a lot of alignment. I'm again considering how kind of recently, in a way, even though it seems like it's been a long time, it's been about 3 years now in the scheme of things and how these things go. We've made a lot of traction in a pretty short time. I mean, we view it very much as like a channel partner, right? Where we're just
Interesting.
internal marketing, like here we are, we can help grow. We're easy to implement, easy to use. Customers get that, return on value, or get that value right in time to market faster, while they're maybe implementing Commerce Cloud, right? So it's a good joint value proposition, I think, for our customers and then also for SAP.
I want to take a quick break from the conversation to tell you about one of our sponsors. What could you achieve if you knew what your customers expected ahead of time? What if you could know what customers expect by category and by brand 12 to 18 months ahead of traditional brand tracking methods? And what if you could know exactly where to adjust and where to spend in order to derive the most benefit every time? A customer expectation audit allows you to identify areas that require strategic reinforcement, as well as pinpoint which values will contribute most to an emotional bond with your brand, and optimize accordingly. Customerland has partnered with Brand Keys, the world's oldest loyalty-focused consumer research firm, to bring real-world customer expectation audits to brands, brand managers, and to CX practitioners everywhere. Want to know where your brand stands and exactly what to do about it? Go to expectationaudit.com. That's expectationaudit.com and download a sample audit today. Not to dwell on this, but I'm really just curious about it. is from what I could tell on your LinkedIn profile, which is everything everybody could possibly know about a person. Not
Pretty much
really.
these days.
This is your first role in your first stint as a CEO?
It is.
So I thought so. Good. Thank you for confirming. That transition, as you said, you've done everything under the sun in this particular realm, but being the person at the pinnacle, the person who's ultimately responsible for the whole thing is entirely different. I've talked to a lot of CEOs, and a lot of them have told me when we get into this kind of a conversation, like that transition personally was either the most natural thing they ever did because they were just ready for it, and here I am, and boom, things just start clicking, or it was the most terrifying, you know, what the heck have I done to myself and the people I'm now leading? And it doesn't seem to be anything in the middle. It was either one or the other.
I think it's in the middle because as an oldest child, someone who always was trying to be a backseat driver, I could backseat drive anything, but was always a leader, high energy, passionate, all that stuff. I do feel like I'm very suited. It just sort of does come naturally in terms of how I feel like I lead, right, authentically and all that kind of thing. I do think that part of it comes very naturally. There are absolutely moments where, whether you call it imposter syndrome or whatever it is, that it's like, how did I get here? How did an English major from Indiana University get here? So sometimes I reflect on that just from my own personal, like, whoa, this isn't quite what I expected. And then, yeah, the burden, right, that you carry for people. So whether it's the Russia-Ukraine war, right? I wasn't expecting when I came in to manage this business for some reason, these things of like, oh, we have teams in Russia. I have a team in Tel Aviv. We have people in all these countries that are affected by cost of living and inflation or, civil unrest and all these things happening in the world. And I talk to those people every day. So that's what I love about my job is that every day I wake up and I'm talking to someone in a different hemisphere, and it's so fascinating and rewarding. And I love bringing those teams together. And then there's also a burden that you carry or a weight that you carry on behalf of what's happening, right, to them that you feel responsible, whether you are or not. At least I do. So that's kind of the heavy thing. And I think the other thing that actually I wasn't as prepared for, even though I did all of these things, is just that amount of context switching of going from a podcast recording to a 2024 financial planning, right, with 400 rows of an Excel spreadsheet. And those kinds of context switches are hard, right? That's hard kind of throughout the day. So
You're the only person I've heard describe it as context switches, but that's actually the hardest part of my life. I completely relate to it.
yeah.
You know, this is one thing I'm fully dialed in. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I'm going to have to switch in about a half hour to do something that's completely different.
So let's get into some other things you wanted to cover. So yeah.
Yeah. Let's bring out the spreadsheets. Let's go have some fun here.
Not my forte. Remember, I said English
Okay.
major.
Yeah, but on that, I can't tell you how many people I speak to who are senior level executives that came to it through deep liberal arts, deep like English majors. And I'm thinking, I could have been an English major, but I wasn't smart enough and, don't know how to say half that stuff anyways. But actually, all my English teachers kind of hated me. That was my thing. So I
My
didn't have a
parents
shot at.
weren't happy with my choice. Let's just say that. I mean, although I was like, but I think I'm going to go to law school. They were like, what are you going to do with that?
Right.
But I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think these are public information. But like heads of product, like Parker Harris, he was an English major. A lot of like colleagues of mine that were at liberal arts schools or big universities, even, but that are CEOs of startups. It's kind of funny, right? Because it's
It's a
like
little
you think
nuts.
you only
Yeah.
have a right brain or a left, whichever.
Yeah, right.
You
One
kind
of
of have
those.
both. So
That's funny. And on the other side of that, I was talking to somebody just last week who's a CEO who came to it through the engineering kind of path.
yeah,
And but again, like admitted, like right up front, he's an engineer. He thinks through about life and business through an engineering lens. And all of a sudden he was tasked with caring for people, which he was,
Right.
he said, unprepared to do. I would say otherwise,
Well,
but
that's why your leadership team is really what's more important. So it is so true what they say, right? Get the people so much smarter than you around the table and then just put them in the right positions, and the rest just sort of naturally happens. You don't actually, you can just be hands off and watch them do their thing.
right.
If you've got the right people in place.
So this is a good moment to plug. I know a handful of people from the SAP world, and I'm just so impressed with all of them. Your colleague Sarah Richter and
Oh
I've
yeah.
spoken a handful of times. She's a delight and super smart. And there's within SAP proper a guy named Nitin Bajatia.
Knitting, yeah.
Nitin, yeah, and who's one of the smartest guys I've ever met. Period, bar none.
Like I was saying, the people around me. So Sarah is the CMO for Emarsys, right? So I learn new things from her every day. Yeah, and Nitin is one of those people who he's like a book. He just knows everything about everything. So
It's true, and he's
yeah,
a nice enough guy. You'd never expect
yeah,
somebody that nice to be that smart, but
yeah.
in
I
my
mean,
head,
I
that's
find
okay.
SAP really inspiring. Like in the US, I think it's like we have a great video called The Company That No One Heard of. And everything that happens in this whole world, SAP has touched it at some point. And it's pretty remarkable when you go to their lab and see the amount of innovation of things that they're doing that you just don't think about every day. It's pretty remarkable to be a
Well,
part of
I'm gonna try and shoehorn myself into one of those sessions at some point, but we'll talk about that later.
that. Yeah, yeah.
I do want to talk about the latest version of the loyalty index. In fact, that was, I think, the first time I got to speak to Sarah. Was the last year's version had just been released, so we got to talk about some of the highlights there, some of the, let's just call it, some of the changes. And I don't know if you're kind of top line familiar enough with it to talk it through,
Yeah.
but I kind of come from a loyalty background. To me,
Mhm.
like pulling those things out is, I can't wait to share them. I wish there were water
Yeah.
coolers still, because
It's
this is
pretty
good stuff.
interesting, isn't it? I
It
mean,
really
we
is.
survey 10,000 consumers, right, all around the globe. And so it is interesting to see regional differences, as well then as just some of the changes of consumer behavior. So it's probably no surprise, but still a little daunting when you see it on paper, right? That loyalty just continues to decrease. And so we had seen, I think, a little uptick. Again, Sarah could correct me there, but overall this year, it's been a drop. And I think this goes hand in hand with, and also what people reported, again, universally around the globe, cost of living concerns,
Mm-hmm.
inflation concerns, and they don't have a choice sometimes about being loyal when they have to be, right, protecting their wallets. So I think, even something like, we know this has been popular, especially with certain generations, to make sure that the brand's values align with your values. And we're pretty steadfast on those, right? Typically, whether it's environmental concerns or other things. And right now, what we saw in this last report is price still will trump that. At the end of the day, people just have to make decisions that even might compromise, right, their values a little bit because of just what's happening, in their own lives, in their own context. And I think, yeah, so I think those were some things, right, that have changed. There's some things that really stayed the same. And again, along those lines, I think of things like incentive-based programs. Again, people still want that exchange. If I spend money with you and more money with you, or I promote you or engage with you somehow, I want a very clear, value exchange. And I don't think those kinds of programs will really ever go away. But it's how do you differentiate those?
Right, right. It's just interesting to me that Emarsys, everybody in the loyalty space, I'm painting a really broad brush, and I'll pay the price for this, but doesn't like to talk publicly about the fact that loyalty, as we define it, is eroding kind of in a big, big way.
Yeah.
It's It just
We have to
is.
confront the brutal facts, right? We can't pretend like everyone loves us and they're because we've got a cool brand or we've been doing our marketing right, that means we've created loyalty, right? Loyalty is an outcome. It's not a software. It's not a points program. In my mind, right, it's the what every marketer's dream is. And so I do think that it's a balance of really talking about that broadly. But thinking about it, like how do you get that short term and maximize those short term opportunities? But you've got to be thinking, right, the long tail, or you're just not going to win right now.
Right. It correlates pretty interestingly with some other research we were just looking at. This company measures customer expectations by category and then by brand within the category. And the way they do it is, which is an exact correlation to what you're saying, is they measure the ultimate, what customers expect in a category ultimately, what would be the ideal. Like if you're going to go shop for a car, what are your expectations when, what if everything just went beautifully, what would that look like? And then how do certain car brands in this case measure up there? And what their data has shown is that customer expectations rise in some categories really quickly, and outpace companies' ability to keep up with that.
Yeah.
So there's this growing gap so often.
It'd be interesting to see that, like you said, compared to other industries, because I think as you and I would especially know, whatever your last great experience was, whether that was checking into your hotel or talking to the person who's in an elevator, whatever your last great experience was, is now your expectation for the next.
Right.
So we also just keep perpetuating like the need of increasing those expectations and all of that in a way too.
Yeah. I mean, that's why a lot of these folks were super annoyed with Amazon, because those expectations, they cross categories too.
Right.
If I
Right.
can get free shipping from Amazon, why can't I get it over here from you guys or whatever it happens to
Absolutely.
be?
And so then we all kind of race to the bottom, I think, in some
Right.
regard, unfortunately.
I'll
So,
put 2 cookies on the pillow. See
right,
that?
right,
That's how
right.
that works.
Well,
Right.
we've seen a lot of our customers doing a lot of things very well. A lot of new approaches to generational marketing, I would say, in terms of really making sure that they're fully omni-channel so that they're reaching all different types of customers, particularly in things like beauty or even automotive, right, where there's loyalty to a brand and it can be multi-generational. So things like that have been pretty interesting that our customers are doing.